Hi everyone, this is Miss Windsor. Before we get started with this study skills workshop today, I just want to say on behalf of myself, the faculty, staff, and administration here at Pima Medical Institute, thank you. Thank you for choosing us and entrusting us with your educational goals. We take our responsibility seriously, and we want you to have the tools that you need, and that is one of the reasons I put together this study skills workshop, so that we can get more tools into your hands so that you can be as successful as possible as a student and then moving into the field as a clinician. So again, welcome aboard. Put on your seatbelt. This is going to be kind of a bumpy ride, but hopefully we'll learn a lot along the way. So we are going to get started with this study skills workshop. So the first thing that I would like to say is that scientists have studied snowflakes, and what they have found is out of the bazillion snowflakes that they have looked at, no two are the same. They're all unique in their own special way and all beautiful in their own special way. And so are you. And so am I, right? We are all unique. No two of us are the same. And so what that has to do with our study skills and study habits is that something that works perfectly for me might not work perfectly for you, but there might be some overlap. Some of the things that I do might help you, but there might be a little skill or trick that you like that doesn't really work for me, and vice versa. And so one of the most important things is for us to get to know ourselves and what our learning needs are. And one of the ways that we can do that is by understanding what our learning style is. Now, learning styles have been around for a long time, and the three major ones are auditory, kinesthetic, and visual. Now, auditory means that you learn by listening, all right, the best. Visual learner means you learn by seeing things, the best. And a kinesthetic learner learns by doing things with their hands and their bodies as far as learning goes. Now, for a long time, we thought that these learning styles were the bee's knees, okay? And newer research and newer literature shows that learning styles, they're the bees, but maybe not the bee's knees, right? So what's scientists and experts in the field have found is that the more we can tap into a multiple of learning styles, the more apt we are to learn, understand, which is comprehension, and retain information, and then importantly, be able to apply it, right, to our classes, to the field, to being a surgical technologist, all right? So there is a quiz. There's a bunch of quizzes out there. You can just Google learning style quiz. I have one here. I'll put a little note for you so that you could just click on this link. And if you don't know what type of learning style you are, then you can take a little quiz of 20 questions about, and you can find out. However, like I said, statistics show that using multiple learning styles are the most beneficial. So what does that mean? Well, that means if we are hearing something, seeing the same thing, and then doing something actively with our bodies, then those three things together are going to help us, all right? It's important that we don't get locked into one particular style, right? We want to keep an open mind about how we learn. I know a lot of us in this program and in this field, we're hands-on learners, right? That's the kinesthetic learner, and I'm definitely a hands-on learner. But I have found that the more times I hear something, see it, and then do it, the more apt it is to stick with me in the long run. And that's what we really need, because we're going to learn things at the beginning of the program that is going to be on our certification exam, right? And that we're going to need to apply to the field and need to use to make sure that we give good patient care. So making sure that we don't just learn something really quickly just for a test and then dump it and then reload with some new stuff, right? It's really important that this stays with us for a long time, okay? So find out what your learning style is, but also try to hit on as many different learning styles as you can. So what are some characteristics of a good student? Well, these are some of the things that I thought of, and I'm a student as well, and so I'm in the same boat that you guys are, and so are the rest of the faculty on our team, actually. So we are all students, and so we feel you. We can relate to where you are. We were where you are once, and we are still continuing to grow ourselves through education. And so some things that came to mind when I think about a characteristic of a good student is that they take pride in their achievements, right? They take responsibility for their learning. They take the initiative to learn. One example might be if we're doing mock procedures in the lab and you're not involved in that procedure, you are still taking an initiative and a responsibility to hone your craft. Maybe that means you are taking notes on that mock procedure, or you have pulled out some instruments that you haven't looked at in a while and you're reviewing those with a classmate. Maybe you need some help loading and passing sutures, and so you find a classmate and you find a place somewhere where you can practice doing that. So taking responsibility for your own learning, and then also ownership of your learning, right? As we practice skills, there's going to be a lot of feedback, and that comes with constructive criticism, which isn't always easy to accept, right? But taking ownership, one of the things that we talk about quite frequently in the field of surgical technology is sterile technique. Now, when something becomes not sterile, that was sterile, we call that a contamination or a break in sterile technique, and we should feel free to call each other out without any repercussions, right? We need to be able to call the surgeon out. Oh, your hat was contaminated, or your hat contaminated that light handle that was sterile. Now we need to replace the light handle, or whatever the case may be. And we need to allow others to call us out too, right? Instead of saying, oh no, I didn't do that. I didn't touch that. I didn't contaminate that, right? To take ownership. Also to come to class on time. And that means being early, right? 10 to 15 minutes early. If you are on time, you are technically late. You need to be there, prepared, ready to learn before class starts, right? Also, being prepared means having the essential tools that you need during class, right? Is that pen, paper, your books, your notebook, whatever the case may be, highlighters. You need to come prepared. When you come to class should not be the first time that you have looked at the material that we are covering for today. If we're covering chapter 1 in our textbook, you should have already read chapter 1, done some active reading, which we'll talk about later, and that way, when you come to class, you're hearing it, seeing it for the second time, right? And that's hitting on more of those learning styles that we talked about. That's going to increase the chance that the information is actually going to stick in our brains. Being present is another one, right? We all have stuff going on in our lives outside of school. And it's really important that we develop the skills during school to be present in the moment in class. This is really going to help us deliver good patient care. We have to be present in the OR. We can't be worrying about what's going on in our personal lives when we have a patient's life in our hands. So we have to be present. Respecting classmates and teachers, I think that just goes without saying. I don't think that needs much explanation. Having a study buddy, pair up with someone in class. Oh, I know a lot of groups in the past have formed Facebook groups. We will have a Google Hangouts group with all of us. Pick their brains, get their support, support each other, all right? Have a study buddy. And then have a team mentality. Honestly, surgery never happens with just one person, right? We have to be able to work with a team. And we have to be able to work with individuals that maybe we don't care to work with that much. We've all had jobs in the past, or we've been in school or taken classes, and there might be an individual that we don't necessarily see eye to eye with. But in the clinical setting, especially in the operating room, this could compromise patient care. So we have to be able to push those things aside and focus and work as a well-oiled machine to make sure that we give the best care to that patient. I always say, as a team, we stand together and we fall together. We help each other and we support each other no matter what. All right, so another important aspect is utilizing your resources. Some of the resources that are available to you, and this is not an all-inclusive list, your teachers. Your teachers are a fantastic resource. They have years of experience in the field working as surgical technologists, and they're all students themselves. So utilize them. Do not wait until you're failing or you're really behind in a subject or a class that you're not understanding. Utilize your teachers. We are here for you. We are your extended family and support system, and we want to help you achieve your goals. Your classmates, like I mentioned before, are also a great resource for you. Each of you bring different experiences and unique perspectives to the classroom and to each other's lives and to my life and the other faculty's life as well. So utilize them as a resource as well. The department chair, that's me. I'm the program director, and I am also a resource. I have an open door policy. If you need anything, you are more than welcome to come into my office at any time. You will have my cell phone number. You can text me, you can call me, you can send me an email, any of those things, and I will address your concerns as quickly and efficiently as possible. Your advisors, these are the ones that helped you get enrolled into the program, and they are an excellent resource and support for you as well. We also have our career services and our student services that are fantastic, and you will meet them, and I highly suggest that you use them as resources as well. In the Blackboard, which is our learning management system, we also have an online library, great resource for you. Tutoring, there is not an official tutoring schedule. However, if you feel like you need tutoring, ask for it. We will make time for you. Online resources, we're going to talk about quite a few online resources, and then you will accumulate a number of digital resources as we go through the program. And the last two things would be the syllabus for the course. One really important section that I always point out is the learning objectives, and they're all the way at the bottom of the syllabus. And the learning objectives really establish the framework for the course. So if you're wondering, like, why are we learning about this? Or what does this class entail? Then you can look at those learning objectives and you can determine them. And then lastly, but not least, like I said, this is not an exhaustive list, is the lesson plan. And sometimes I refer to it as the addendum. That's kind of an old school term, but the lesson plan is really the blow by blow, the day-to-day goings-ons of the class. It will have what we're looking at that day. Is it asynchronous? Is it synchronous? So that means, are you working on your own that day? Are you which is asynchronous? Synchronous, are you having some sort of Zoom session with your instructor, or are you coming to campus? Are there labs or skills or competencies or something like that? And it will also have the homework. It will have a breakdown of the pointage that's associated with all of the assignments, quizzes, tests, and competencies for that course as well. Now, something that's important is that you make a plan. Now, I'm sure that most of you have heard the saying, most people don't plan to fail, they just fail to plan, right? So something that I use in my daily life and that you guys made when you were getting ready to apply to the program is that daily success calendar. Now, our lives change, jobs change, hours of our shifts change. There's a lot of variety in our schedules, right? So you may have to go back to this and edit it, but what I suggest that you do is you make a success calendar and you make sure you carve out enough time for studying. My suggestion is for every hour that you are in class, you are spending 2 hours outside of class studying. So if you're in class 20 hours a week, outside of class, you should be studying about 40 hours. And I know that sounds like a ton of time. And if you do have some healthcare experience, or you've taken anatomy and physiology or med-term or those kinds of things, it may not be as heavy lifting for you, and so you can adjust that accordingly, but minimum 20 hours a week studying. And I would suggest that you give these success calendars to those that are most influential in your life. Mom, dad, brother, sister, boyfriend, wife, husband, partner, whoever, those that are in your close circle. Give them a copy and say, hey, can you help hold me accountable to my study time? Right? This is the time that I've set aside so that I will be successful in my endeavors, in my education, and in my new career field that I have chosen. And then another thing I would say is don't plan to study 6 hours straight, right? That is too much for our brains. Plan 20 to 30-minute sessions, then take a little break, then come back to it, then take another break, then, and so on and so forth. When should you review? Well, review directly after class, whatever has been covered in the class that day, and maybe a few minutes, 15 minutes before you go to sleep at night, look at your notes. Each day for 10 minutes, you should look at the old stuff, all right? Because we don't want to forget the old stuff, right? We're still going to need to use that information to deliver good patient care and to pass our certification exam, right? And then in 1 month, do a good review of things, all right, so that you're keeping that fresh. Make sure that you identify areas of difficulty. I call this poking holes, all right? You want to poke holes, find the things that you don't know, and focus on those things, all right? Try to explain it to someone else. If you think you have a concept down, say, you know, hey mom, or hey dad, or whoever, can you just listen to me for a couple seconds while I explain the process of mitosis or cell division? And then that'll be a good test to see if you know it or not, and maybe they can ask you some questions. The last thing that I want to talk about regarding planning your work is study goal contracts, right? We want to make sure that we reward ourselves for our successes. And so having some sort of study goal contract is a really good tool. And then if you meet that goal that you set for yourself, then a little reward comes after that, right? So maybe my study goal for this week is to study 20 hours, this week, all right, between Monday and Sunday. And so when Sunday comes, if I've studied that 20 hours, then on Monday I get a Starbucks, all right, or something like that. Or I take a bubble bath, or I plan a spa day, or I get to lounge in the hammock and listen to some of my favorite music for 20 minutes, or whatever the case may be. Study goal contracts and rewards. Reward your efforts. All right, another thing I want to talk about is your study space. Now, we are going to be having some classes at home, right? So not only does your study space need to be conducive to studying, also your learning space for when you're in class, right? For me, my learning space needs to have paper and pens and highlighters and paper clips and staplers and all kinds of fun stuff. It needs to have good lighting. I need to have a comfy chair, and the environment needs to be such that I'm not too hot and I'm not too cold. I might need to have my coffee or my water, so I want to have something to drink. This might also be a good place for me to put some inspirational things in my space. So whether that's printing out pictures or, buying a little canvas with an inspirational quote or whatever, kind of having some of those things up. It's also a good place to put your calendar, your success calendar, or if you want like a desk calendar where you can write some stuff on as well. It's nice if it's organized and it's quiet and it's free of distractions. But your space, make it your space. Personalize it. You want to enjoy going into your space, right? Because you're going to have to spend a lot of time there, whether it's we're Zooming for class or you're studying or working on your homework. So make sure that your study space is conducive to learning. Now, let's talk a little bit about rating. There are a plethora of books that you will be receiving during this program. You'll have anatomy and physiology books, your surgical technology book, your pharmacology book, microbiology. There's a whole bunch of them, communications. It will be your responsibility to read all of those books by the time the program is over, all right? And that is a lot of heavy lifting. Sometimes chapters are coming at us, one chapter a day, all right? Monday we go over chapter 1, Tuesday chapter 2, Wednesday chapter 3, Thursday chapter 4, so on and so forth. Sometimes it's 2 chapters a day, all right? So those books aren't really exciting. They're not really engaging, I'm not gonna lie, all right? Even though we like the material, reading a textbook is not really exciting, all right? So what can we do? Well, we can practice something called active reading. And active reading means you're going to keep some sort of notepad beside you, or maybe you have some different colored highlighters, a pink, a blue, a green, a yellow, something like that. And as you are reading, you are either taking notes on what you are reading, or you're highlighting important concepts or phrases. Maybe you're underlining, writing things in the margin. I do that sometimes, circling things. Actively reading means you're not just sitting there with the book, just reading the words and doing nothing else. And I just want to take a moment here to say that it is not going to help you if reading is your study strategy, right? Maybe there is a very small percentage of us that learn just by reading, but statistics show that reading is the worst way, the least effective way for us to study, all right? So we're going to talk about some other ways that we can study, but reading gives us that false sense of security that, oh yeah, I read that, okay, I know that. If you think you know it and you're using reading to study for a test, here's my suggestions. Take the headings and turn them into questions, all right? Like principles of sterile technique, and they're listed in the textbook. So my title would be, what are the principles of sterile technique? And I'm going to test myself and write them down, right? Maybe you can take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle, and then on one side, write your question and answer it, and then look at the textbook and add the stuff that you didn't know. All right, and then just review the stuff that you didn't know. Don't worry about the stuff that you do know, but active reading is what is going to help you when you're preparing for class and if you are using that as a study tool. I already mentioned explaining the concepts to someone else, but the last thing that I want to talk about is paraphrasing. And paraphrasing means you put it into your own words. Maybe you read a section and then you just write down what you read in your own words on a separate sheet of paper and then compare the two, right? That'll help you to see if you have it or not. Next, let's talk a little bit about note-taking. Like I suggested, reading the text prior to class is going to be essential. Do not skip this, all right? Actively read the text before it is discussed in class, and then take notes in class. If you are on a Zoom or if you are in person and your instructor is lecturing, just sitting there is not going to be enough in most cases to get that information into your brain where it is going to stay for the long term. So how do we take notes? Well, when we're taking notes, we need to make sure well, I guess adjust reading speed kind of goes with read text prior to class, right? But when you're taking notes, keep them short. ID your key points and paraphrase. Use questions to also identify concepts that are unclear as you are reading through the text, like, man, this just really does not make any sense to me. Or place an X next to items that you know will be on the exam, right? So you do your pre-notes and then you come to class and you can add and highlight and underline from your own notes. Maybe the teacher says this is a really important concept for us to know, so you're like, oh, I'm going to put an X by that. Or, you know, after the teacher went over this concept, I still don't understand it, so I'm going to put a question mark and I'm going to remember to circle back with my instructor just to get some clarification. All right, some note-taking tips when you're in class. Write the date of the lecture and also write the title of what it is. Maybe it's a chapter and you write the chapter title. Also write the name of the class and write legibly. I have a bad habit of writing really quickly, and later when I go back, I can sometimes not read what I wrote. So it's really important to write neatly so that your notes are legible, so that you can read them when you go back to do that 1 month review. You can understand what you wrote yourself. Write only one idea per line, and it's good to leave a blank space in between so that you can add additional information later on if you need to. Also write down important details that were discussed in class, as well as key terms and definitions that were discussed in class. Abbreviate what you write, but make sure you don't abbreviate so much that you can't interpret what it is later. You can leave out the words that aren't important, and you don't have to worry about punctuation. And then lastly, underline or circle anything that is emphasized or repeated several times throughout the lecture or the class. Now, there is a special way of taking notes. You guys might have heard of it. It's called the Cornell notes taking method. And here's a picture on the right side of your screen of the Cornell notes, where you kind of make this upside down, weird looking T thing. And then you write your main ideas and your key questions after that you have after the notes are completed on one side. And then on the other side, you're going to indicate your keywords and ideas, important dates, people, places, repeated things, information that was stressed, ideas or things that were written on the board, and then info from the textbooks or anything like that that was mentioned, diagrams, pictures, formulas, etc. And then at the bottom, leave a space for a summary of your notes. So this is that once you get home, just write a quick little summary of what you learned, and that would be a good little review thing for you. So record your notes in the right-hand column, reduce your notes in clue column on the left, recite your notes out loud from the clue column, reflect on the information, and then review your notes immediately afterwards and on a regular basis. Now, the exam. Let's talk about exams. In these courses, for the most part, the exams that you take will be multiple choice exams. All right, so we're going to focus our efforts for the sake of this study skills workshop on multiple choice exam test taking strategies. All right, so when you prepare for the exam, again, please do not cram the night before. That doesn't help any of us. Review frequently. Do not cram. Yes, please do some studying the night before the exam, but also make sure that you're well rested and eat something before you come in and drink water. All right, this is going to help get your brains fired up. Okay. Also, be prepared. Get there a little bit early so that you can get there, get settled, and get in the right frame of mind for your test. All right? Ask for and accept help if you need it, and also utilize your support system. We talked about all those resources that you have. All right? So when you're preparing and you know there is an exam coming up, if there's a concept you still don't understand, right? I still do not understand cellular respiration. I need you to explain it to me again, or whatever the case may be. Connect with your teacher, utilize your support system, maybe ask a classmate, or something of that sort. Now, test tips. All right, so there's going to be a lot about test tips coming at you from here throughout the rest of the presentation, pretty much. You want to make sure that you don't rush through the exam, that you slow down and you read each question in its entirety and every single answer. All right? You want to identify any clues in the question or the answers. And you know, in your classes, you're going to be taking tests on the computer, but there is nothing wrong with having a blank piece of paper there and writing things out. Draw it out, write some notes, write down whatever is in your brain that you think you know about that concept. So having a blank piece of paper with you really helps. And like I said, get a good night's sleep, eat breakfast, drink water. Now, let's talk about some tactics that you can use to help you remember some stubborn concepts, right? Sometimes it's really difficult if we have like a list or a process or a group of things that we need to remember, and it's hard for us to get them to stick in our brains. So one thing that we can do is use mnemonics to remember. And I'm sure that you've heard of at least one of these. In math, there is a common mnemonic, and it is PEMDAS. And the little sentence that goes along with that is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And PEMDAS reminds us that when we are solving mathematical equations, that we want to solve them in a specific order to come up with the right answer. And so PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponent, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. So we want to solve in that order. If you have seen a rainbow, the colors are always in a specific order. And the mnemonic we use to remember that order is Roy G. Biv. And that reminds us that the colors of the rainbow in order are red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Roy G. Biv. And then there was a couple off-the-wall examples that I found just for fun. Surgical indications for endocarditis, which I haven't ever heard or seen this one, but I thought it was interesting, is phase. Prosthetic, heart failure, abscess, sepsis, embolization, and size of vegetation. So phase is a way for us to remember the indications of endocarditis, which is inflammation of the inner lining of the heart. Now, the planets. An easy way for us to remember the order of the planets is to write a mnemonic. And this one here is kind of funny. My violently evil mermaid just served us narwhal parts. So that is a way that we can remember the order: Mars, Venus, Earth, Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. But there is some debate whether Pluto is still a planet or not. Anyways, you get the gist of mnemonics. Something else we can do if you are a visual learner is visualize and associate. So what do? Well, we use substitute words to break down complex concepts, and then we get to use our imagination to create a crazy, funny, vivid mental image in our mind of whatever that idea is. And then we mentally associate that visual image, the visual images that we created in our mind, we associate those with each other. So here's an example here of Gary the bull relaxing on a sofa. Now, we're trying to remember that the capital of Bulgaria is Sofia. All right, so this could be the mental image that we cook up to remember that Gary the bull is laying on the sofa and he's wearing this crazy little twirly bird hat, right? So sofa plus bull, Gary, right? That's kind of sounds like Bulgaria, right? So creating these funny, quirky images or funny, quirky mnemonics to remember things is actually extremely helpful. Now, creating an acronym. Now, I'm sure all of you use acronyms when you're texting, right? Like maybe you've used LOL or BRB, be right back, laugh out loud, ROFL, okay? ASAP. There's a lot of acronyms that we use in our regular life, and there are a lot of acronyms that we use in the medical field as well. But acronyms help us to remember words in a specific order, all right? And, you know, the sky's the limit. One of the places that I think acronyms are helpful is in remembering the order of the phases of mitosis, which is down here in this bottom left corner, PMAT. PMAT is how I remember that the phases of mitosis are prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So PMAT is very helpful. Another thing that we can do is make a rhyme or a song. So rhymes, melodies, rhythms, they can all aid in our memory. And if you do a Google search on YouTube for a song about blood flow through the heart, or a song about remembering the bones of the body or the muscles. They are out there and they're hilarious and quirky and funny, but they really do help it to stick in our brains. So if you're having a hard time remembering something, maybe write a little rhyme or a little poem or create a funny little song. And, a good example of that is something that we learned when we were little kids, which is the ABCs. And the ABCs are to the tune of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And I also learned my helping verbs that way. And I think that was in 5th grade, and I still remember them today. So setting something to a tune can be really helpful to get it to stick in our memory. So let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a multiple choice question. Okay, the question part, we refer to that as the stem. All right, so as we go through the rest of this, if I say stem, you know I'm talking about the question part. And if I say distractors, then I'm talking about the wrong answers for choices, right? And then the correct is the right answer, right? That fulfills the question or the stem. All right, so now that we have established what the anatomy of a question is, we're going to look at 6 different multiple choice test taking strategies. And the first one is process of elimination. And I'm sure that you use this in your everyday lives all the time. It's a very good problem-solving tool. And the first thing to do is eliminate choices that are obviously incorrect, and then look at other choices for possible eliminations, and then finally we'll choose our answer. Just look at my pen here, and we'll get started. All right, so let's practice with this one. The question is, or the stem, the larynx is located between the what and what. All right, so we're going to do process of elimination. Well, even if we don't have a lot of knowledge, we might be able to eliminate a couple of these, like esophagus and carina, right? The esophagus, well, I think that's part of the digestive system. All right, so I'm going to eliminate that one. And then there's another one with esophagus as well. Now I know that the larynx and pharynx are associated with each other, but I'm not 100% sure. I think the carina might have something to do with the bronchi. So I'm kind of narrowed it down to a 50-50 chance here. I'm going to say my answer is C. All right, and let's see if that's the correct answer or not. If I can get it to advance. There we go. Yep, pharynx and trachea. So process of elimination. Eliminate the ones you for sure don't know, and then write it out or talk it out if you're not 100% sure which of the 2 that are left are your correct choice. Process of elimination. So now let's look at multiple choice test taking strategy number 2, which is looking for clue words and numbers. So here are some helpful hints. The first thing, if 2 answers are opposite, one is probably correct. If one says hot and the other says cold, one of those is probably going to be our right answer. Now, if we have answers or distractors with words like always, never, all, must, those are words that we refer to as all-inclusive, right? Something always happens. How many times does something always happen? Or something never happen? Or all people do this? Not very often, right? So if you have potential answers that have these all or nothing words like always, never, all, must, there's a good chance that they're incorrect. Now, once you've done your process of elimination and you're to a point where you have 2 answers and you just don't know which one is the right answer, maybe one of them has this all-inclusive word, and that might help you to eliminate it. That doesn't mean it's going to work 100% of the time, but it could be a good clue word. Now, answers with seldom, generally, tend to, probably, usually, that's the opposite, right? They're usually correct answers, unlike the ones with the all-inclusive words. Another good tip is to look for grammatical clues between the question and the choice. The question and the correct answer often have verbs of the same tense and nouns and verbs that agree. All right, so look at the stem and look at the answer. Answer choices actually give you a clue. Also, underline familiar words or phrases that you remember from the lecture or the textbook. Now, if you're taking it on the computer, this is a little bit more difficult, but you can definitely write them down. And then lastly, be aware of degrees of correctness. With numbers, one choice is usually too small and the other is too large. So if you have no idea and there's like 5, 10, 15, 20, eliminating 20 and 5 may get you to your answer. Not always. But if you have no idea and you can't do your process of elimination anymore, then that might be another clue to help you. All right, so let's practice for this multiple choice, on this multiple choice question. So the question is, which of the following statements is correct for handling of dirty instruments during the breakdown of the sterile setup? Now, I know you guys don't know much about this, and I picked a question that you might not know much about on purpose so that you could look for some clue words. Now, I'm going to give you a couple seconds to see if you can identify any clue words. Okay, did you find any? The first one that I found right here was in A, and it says all instruments. All instruments. Another one I found was right here in B. It says always remain. And then there were a couple other ones that I found that weren't all inclusive, and that was usually and are usually. All right, so I'm going to use my process of elimination, and I'm just going to get rid of A and get rid of B because I don't know anything about this subject. All right, I don't know anything at all, and I'm just going by these clue words. So I'm going to cross out those two. So let's look at C and D. And here's where, if you don't know the answer or what the concept is that the STEM is talking about, just read the answer and see if it makes sense. Just read it and say, does this make sense? So let's look at C and then let's apply that concept and see if that helps us. So C says, dirty instruments are usually opened or disassembled and placed in a basin of water. Okay, dirty instruments, they're opened and disassembled and placed in a basin of water. Okay, I think that kind of makes sense. Let's look at the next one. D says dirty instruments are usually kept closed and placed in a basin of saline. So keeping instruments closed doesn't really make sense to me because, you know, I've put stuff in the dishwasher before with the lid still on it and the inside of the Tupperware with the lid didn't get cleaned. All right, so it kind of doesn't make sense that you would keep instruments closed. So I'm going to eliminate D. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm going to say C is my answer. And so let's see what the answer is. Yes. So simply by looking at for clue words and asking myself, do the potential answers make sense? I was able to come to my answer. All right, so here let's practice our strategy number 3, trying to answer before looking. So I've covered up potential answers, and we have two questions here that we're going to look at. So the first one is, what type of instrument is a knife? Now this is to help us focus on finding the answer without the help of the alternatives or the answer choices. So, you know, I don't really know much about surgery. I don't know much about anything. I'm just starting this program. What do I know about a knife? Well, I know that I use a knife to cut my food at home, and so I know that knives cut things. Other than that, they're made out of metal. I know that, but I really don't know that much else about knives. So, all right, I've determined what I know about knives out loud, or I've written it down, and so now we're going to see what the alternatives are. So let's look at each one of those. Grasping, viewing, cutting. Oh, well, cutting. Well, I said that I knew a knife cuts things. Okay, that could be my potential answer. Let's look at the last one. Probing. All right, well, I guess you could poke at something with a knife. I don't think you could grasp anything with a knife. Now, I'm going to use my process of elimination, and I'm going to say grasping is out. Now, viewing, maybe if I cut into a person, then I could view them, but the knife really isn't helping me to view. I don't know. Maybe it is. Probing. I don't know. I think I'm going to go with my first instinct and say cutting, because now I think, now that I've seen the distractors, I am overthinking things. So I'm going to go with my initial thought before I saw any of the alternatives, and I am going to say my answer is cutting. All right, that was a really bad circle. Okay, let's see what the answer is. And the answer is cutting. All right. Let's look at the second one. The second one is, the STEM says the medical term for softening of the bone is what? Okay, so I'm looking for a medical term. I've had medical terminology. I do remember that osteo, I'm pretty sure, means bone. I don't know what softening is. Softening. No, I don't know what that is. Okay, well, I've determined all that I know about what the STEM is asking. Now let's go ahead and look at the alternatives. So the alternatives are osteomalacia, osteomyelitis, osteoarthritis, and osteoporosis. Well, I knew that bone was osteo, so that doesn't really help me use the process of elimination. But I do recognize two words here. I recognize osteoarthritis. I know that my mom had arthritis in her knee, and that was a painful joint thing. And I know that it was like the wearing away and not the softening. So because of that, I'm going to eliminate osteoarthritis. And then I also know what osteoporosis is. A friend of mine, her mom had osteoporosis, and that had to do with the bone not being healthy, and it starts to look like a sponge. It like looks porous like a sponge, and so that doesn't sound like softening to me either. So I'm going to get rid of osteoporosis. Okay, so now I'm down to two, right? And here maybe malacia sounds, itis is inflammation. I know that from osteoarthritis, itis, and this is saying softening. Inflammation and softening, I don't really think those are the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and eliminate that too. And I'm going to make another bad circle squarish thing around osteomalacia. I think that's the right answer. And the survey says it's osteomalacia. Now, I am playing, like being a little facetious here, right? I know the answers to these questions already, but I'm hoping that it's giving you a sense of how you could methodically walk through a question, even if you don't automatically know the answer right away. All right, let's look at multiple choice test taking strategy number 4, the true-false test. All right, so for the true-false test, what we do is we ask ourselves, is the choice true or is the choice false? And, if I'm taking a test that's on paper, I a lot of times will write a T or an F next to it. All right, so you can do the same thing by just jotting it down on a piece of paper. So here's the question. The question is, or the STEM says, the smallest bird in the world is the blank. Okay, the smallest bird. I know some things about birds. All right, let's see if we can go through here and do some true false. Okay, an eagle. The smallest bird in the world is the eagle. True or false? Well, eagles are pretty big. I don't think that's correct. I'm going to say it's false. And if it's false, I'm going to eliminate it. What about the vulture? The vulture is still, in my mind, a sizable bird. So I'm going to say that that's false as well. And if that's false, I can eliminate it. The penguin. Well, I know there are some smaller penguins, but I know if I'm looking at D as well, the hummingbird, I know the hummingbird is actually a very small bird. I have some that come to my feeders. I know that they're really small. So I'm going to go ahead and say that penguin is false and that hummingbird is my true answer. And that allows me to eliminate penguin. All right, so the smallest bird in the world is the hummingbird. That makes sense to me. That sounds true. And it is the true one. All right, multiple choice test taking strategy number 5, dissecting the STEM. See, you even get to dissect things when you take tests. It's super cool. So the STEM is going to have a few characteristics that we need to be aware of. Now, sometimes they might be a complete sentence. Other times, and with like a question mark at the end, right? Which of the following is the biggest bird in the world? Question mark. Or it could be an incomplete sentence where we have to fill in the blank or something. Like on the slide before, the smallest bird in the world is the blank, okay? The STEM can also be positive where it asks a question regarding what is true, or it could be negative and it asks a question regarding what is false. Now, the false ones are really tricky, okay? We have to be very careful with these questions because they tend to be missed most often because we fail to read the entire question. So always make sure you read the entire STEM carefully and completely. And maybe you need to jot it down on your paper. I'm looking for the false answer, or I'm looking for the true answer. Sometimes it will say all of the following are true except, right? And so that means I'm looking for the false one. And sometimes that's hard for me to remember in my mind. So we'll just go ahead and jot that down. All right. A little bit more about dissecting the STEM. Again, this is a reminder to look for some clue words like except, not, never, further, least, avoid, contraindicated, right? Sometimes these items are going to be identified by bold or italic lettering, but at the end of the day, it's our responsibility to catch these in the STEM. And that might mean writing down the question, circling it, underlining those words, whatever the case may be, to help us understand what the STEM is asking. Because if we don't understand what the STEM is asking us to do, it's going to be a lot more difficult for us to get to the right answer. And then lastly, try dissecting difficult words. If you have a long word like pancreaticoduodenoscopy, and you're not sure what that is, write it out and then break it down into its root words, suffixes, prefixes, and just define what parts you know. That's going to help you do a process of elimination for at least some of the alternatives or the distractors. Okay, so now let's practice and apply our multiple choice test taking strategy number 5, which is dissecting the STEM. All right, so the question is asking us, which of the following statements is not true of the testes of the male reproductive system? Now, I did see a This right here, right? Did you guys catch that? Not true. All right, which of the following statements is not true? So that means we're going to be looking for what? The true statement or a false statement as our answer? Well, we're going to be looking for the false statement, right? Because not true equals false. Okay, so let's go through here and see if we can determine if these are true or if they're false. All right, the first one is they are external organs. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that the testicles are external organs. They are outside of the body. So I'm going to put a T here. The next one is they are internal organs. Now, these are exact opposites of each other. And so I already said that the external is true. So I'm going to see if this one I think is false. Let's look at another one. They serve as a safe place for the sperm to grow and mature. I know that sperm do live there, so I'm going to say that that's true. And then the last one is they are covered by a protective covering called the scrotum. And I know that that is true. But what if I didn't know this was true, right? I knew they were covered by a protective something. I wasn't sure what the name was, right? We can always default back to, well, we did find one that we were like 99.9% sure that it was false. Okay, and so we could go with that answer. So let's see what our answer is. And yes, our answer is B. They are internal organs is the false statement. Okay, let's try another one. So this question here, it says all of the following are true of volcanoes except. So there's a couple things in here that could be tricky. It has the word true, so at first I thought I might be looking for the true statement, but then it has this word except. All are true except. So are we going to be looking for a true statement or a false statement? We're going to be looking for a false statement, right? All are true except. We want to find the false one. Let's go through and do our true-false technique and see where we end up. So the first one says there are more than 500 active volcanoes in the world. I have no idea. That sounds like really a lot to me. What about the next one? Volcanoes never erupt more than once. See anything in there? Did you pick up on this word? Never. Never erupt more than once. Now, from what we learned before about there could be certain all-inclusive words that could mean that it is not, that is a false statement, right? So there's a good chance that this could be false. Let's see if we can eliminate any of the others. Let's look at the next one. Magma is liquid rock inside a volcano. Oh yeah, I saw a show on that once, and I know magma is that hot liquid red stuff that like comes pouring out of the volcano. So I am confident that that one is true. And then the last one, fresh lava can be more than 700 degrees Celsius. Well, I know that it is smoking hot when it comes out of there. So I'm not 100% sure. But I'm kind of leaning towards this one to be true. So then let's circle back. There's no information in my brain that is going to help me determine whether or not this A statement is true, that there's 500 active volcanoes, unless we're studying volcanoes, but we're not. So I'm going to default to my test-taking strategy that I learned before, that if there is a distractor that has an all-inclusive word, that could point me to my answer. And so I'm going to say B is my answer. And that is the correct answer. So last one, multiple choice test-taking strategy number 6 is avoid misreading questions. Misreading is the #1 error that students make that lead them to the wrong answer, right? Many students read the answers first and then they don't take the time to understand the STEM and what the STEM is asking us to do or asking us to find, and so they jump to choose an answer so that they can get on to the next one. And a lot of times it does lead to the incorrect choice. So what do we do? Well, I'm glad you asked. I have some tips for you. So the first tip is going to be cover the answers and then read the entire question first. Remember that? It's all coming back to you now. We talked about that strategy earlier on. Another thing you can do is ask yourself, what is the question asking? What is it wanting me to find? Okay. Another thing that you can do is rephrase the question in your own words until you understand what it is asking. Write it out. Okay. Another thing that we can do is, without looking at the answers, ask ourselves, what do I know about that? Well, I gave the example of the knife. Okay. What type of instrument is a knife? Well, what do I know about a knife? I know it cuts. Okay. So you can write down the things that you know about it before you look at the actual answers. And then if it's there, boom, you know you have the right answer. Another thing you can do is jot down what you know about it on a separate piece of paper, like I just said. After that, then you can look at the answers and eliminate the ones that you know are incorrect. Remember, process of elimination was our #1 test-taking strategy. And then once you've narrowed it down, like maybe you were able to eliminate 2 and now you have 2 left. And at this point, it's good to ask yourself again, what do I know about XYZ that's in the alternative, right? Or in the answer choices that we have. Okay, so those are my tips. Now let's practice. This question is saying, what can be accomplished when positioning for a thyroidectomy to facilitate exposure of the operative site? Wow, what can be accomplished? That sounds really complicated for my brain. When positioning for a thyroidectomy, okay, well, I'm pretty sure a thyroidectomy from my midterm class means taking out the thyroid. And I know that the thyroid is in the front part of the neck. All right. So it's wanting me to find out, when they're positioning a patient for a thyroidectomy, how can we expose the site best to get the thyroid out? Okay, that's what it's asking me. Okay, so now that I know what it's asking me and I've kind of rephrased it in my own words, let's look at the different choices. So the first one is A, a rolled sheet is placed under the shoulders. What would happen if we placed a rolled sheet under the shoulders? It would probably make the head go back, right? And that would expose the neck. That might be a possible answer. Let's look at the other ones. B says the patient's head is rotated to the left. Well, I know where the thyroid is at the front of the neck, and if we rotate the head to the left, that's not going to really make it easy for the surgeon to get the thyroid out. So I'm going to eliminate that one. That doesn't sound good to me. What's the next one? The patient is placed in Trendelenburg. Well, I know that Trendelenburg means that we're going to put the patient in a head down position. And a head down position doesn't really seem like that would be easy for the surgeon to get to the patient's thyroid. So I'm going to eliminate that as well. And then the last one is placing a bolster under the axilla, and the axilla is the armpit. All right, so they're going to put some sort of bump in the armpit. Doesn't really sound like that's going to help get us our exposure. All right, I'm going to eliminate that one too, and I'm pretty confident that this rolled sheet one makes sense. So I'm going to go with that as my answer, and that is our correct answer. All right, let's practice it. Another one. The incision used for a splenectomy is blank. Okay, so here we have an incomplete sentence and we're having to fill in the blank essentially. So again, we can ask ourselves, what do I know about the location of the spleen? And what do I know about various surgical incisions? Well, I know that the spleen is located on the left side of the body. And so knowing that information, I really don't know much about incisions, but I do know that the spleen is on the left side of the body, and I haven't looked at the answers yet. I'm covering them up with my hand right now. So now let's look at the choices for our answers and see if any of those make sense. So the first one is midline transverse. Midline transverse. Well, transverse goes across. I don't know, maybe that could be it. Right subcostal. Well, that's below the ribs on the right side, and I said the spleen lives on the left, so I'm going to take that one out. And then C says left subcostal. Well, I know the spleen is on the left, so that one kind of makes sense to me. And then let's look at D, lower paramedian. Well, the spleen is up high, like under the ribs, so it doesn't really make sense for lower paramedian, so I'm going to get rid of that one. And now I have my midline transverse and my left subcostal. And my initial thought was that the spleen is on the left, and so that left subcostal incision makes sense to me, so I'm going to go with that. And that is our answer. Okay, so we're coming into the home stretch here. What do we do if more than one answer seems correct? What can we do? Well, there are some things that we can do. We can ask ourselves, does the answer completely address the question? All right, has it tied up all the loose ends? Right? If you have to overthink and really stretch that is the right answer, then it's probably not. Eliminated, okay? If you think an item is a trick question, it's probably not. More often than not, there are no trick questions. So take questions at their face value, and as much as you can, try not to read in to the question and the answers, potential answers. And then lastly, if you're like me, I get gut feelings, all right? And my initial instinct of an answer is usually the right one. Do I always trust it? No, but I'm getting better at it. And so should you work to get better at it, because research shows that we have instincts and feelings that are typically right, and we should listen to them. So this goes hand in hand with not changing your answer. All right, do not go back and change your answer unless you just blatantly clicked the wrong thing. Okay, don't go back and look and say, oh, well, no, it might not be that. I'm going to change it to this. 9 times out of 10, your first answer is the right answer. Go with your instinct, go with your gut, all right? And I love this example of we can still know how we feel about a person even if we can't remember their name, right? That person that was rude to you in the grocery store, or that person that you didn't even know, or that person that held the door for you when you had your arms full of groceries coming out of the store. You have certain feelings that you attach to those people even though you don't even know them. And so finding the right answer to the question can sometimes work in the same way. Navigating difficult words. Don't choose an answer just because it's the only one with words you recognize. Try dissecting difficult words. Write them down, break them up into their pieces, and try to identify what those pieces mean. Notice words like may, can, will, often, rarely, etc. Often these answer choices will be wrong, let me start again. Words like may or can or will or rarely are often a good choice. And answers that contain words like exactly and always are not a good answer choice. Again, they're those all-inclusive words which do not leave any room for exception. And then lastly, be alert for switchback words such as but or although or nevertheless, which can indicate a shift in thought. Remember our question, all of the following are true except. All right, so make sure that you get the full gist of what the test writer is asking you to do or find. Some other bits of wisdom. If you have a difficult question, don't waste too much time on questions that appear too hard or difficult. And then try to identify any obvious incorrect answers. Again, process of elimination is really going to be your friend. Ask yourself if the ones that you have left are possibly the correct answer. When you systematically go through each answer, you're often able to think of things or write down things that you might have overlooked by only scanning the answers. So really give them a good going over, if you know what I mean. And then new information. Correct answers typically do not add new information to the system. Okay, so if new information is being included that doesn't seem to relate to the topic that the STEM is asking about, then that can probably be eliminated. A couple of more bits and bits. Contextual clues. Again, look for and understand the context of the question. More than one answer may look right, but only one will fit the context the best. And here it is again, stick with your first choice. It's best to stick with the answer that you chose first. Sometimes switching your answer and second guessing yourself can lead to an incorrect answer choice. And then phrases. Be aware of answers that repeat word for word portions of the question. It's usually a wrong answer. Most correct choices paraphrase a point. All right, and then if you have an answer with like slang language, probably can eliminate that one as well, unless you're taking a test about slang language, which you will not be doing in this program. Some study apps that would be very beneficial for you. I have a few of them, 11 of them. The first one is called RefMe. And with RefMe, you can scan a book's barcode and create a citation for your whatever you're writing. If you need to reference a threaded discussion or a paper or whatever, we use APA format, and RefMe can be really helpful for you. Study Blue is another one, and all of these are free, by the way, which allows you to upload class materials and share them with others. So this would be a great way for you guys to network as a team. Evernote is a tool that allows you to capture a note or a memo in any format. And then, of course, the Oxford Dictionary is a great one to have in your repertoire. Dragon is a free dictation app where you can talk to it and it'll convert anything for you, and then you can paste it into other apps, send it as an email message, save it for later, whatever. GoConquer is one of my favorites, which allows you to make mind maps, flashcards, quizzes. It's a fantastic study tool, so I highly suggest GoConquer. Office Lens is one that I hadn't heard about before, but this is an app from Microsoft, and it allows you to take pictures of documents, maybe what the teacher's written on the whiteboard or blackboard, magazines, receipts, whatever, and you can convert them into editable and shareable text, which is really awesome. My Homework Student Planner is also a great one that allows you to track your classes, your homework, your tests, and all of those things so that you can make sure that you're submitting and completing your assignments on time. Create Mind Map is another one that's similar to GoConquer. And then Google Drive. Google Drive is awesome because you can store all of your documents online. So if you are at home working on your laptop and then you go to school and you want to work on the same document but you didn't bring your laptop, it's all in your Google Drive. You can pull it up anywhere there is internet access and work on your documents. And then lastly, up here on the right, Quizlet. Quizlet allows you to make flashcards, and we will definitely be using Quizlet in your program, but you can start using it now for terminology and concepts, and you can create sets of flashcards, and you can create tests and study the flashcards, play games. There's a variety of modalities that you can use in the Quizlet app. All right, so that concludes our skinny on study skills. I hope that this was helpful for you and you feel like you have a better sense of what tools there are for you to use so that you can be successful in your program and achieve your goals. And as always, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out and ask me, or if you have other apps or resources that you use that you think are helpful, please leave them at the end of this presentation. I would love to learn about additional resources as well. And as always, thank you for listening. I appreciate it.